History is not a story. It is a dataset. It is a collection of records, of numbers, of blueprints and photographs. And when the numbers do not support the story, we are told to trust the story, not the numbers. We are told that in the 19th century, humanity accomplished the impossible. In the span of a few short decades, entire continents were wired with telegraphs, crisscrossed with railways, and populated with colossal stone cities that stand to this day. We are shown pictures of men with simple tools and told they moved mountains. We are given census figures for fledgling towns and told they financed and built structures that would challenge even modern engineering. The official narrative is one of heroic, unprecedented growth. But the numbers tell a different story. They speak of populations too small, timelines too short, and a labor force that is mathematically insufficient for the task. They show an anomaly, hiding in plain sight, within the pages of official government records. This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of arithmetic. In this investigation, we will not speculate on fantasy. We will take the official statistics, the documented construction timelines, and the accepted laws of logistics, and we will run the math. We will ask a simple question. Did the 19th century have enough people to build the 19th century? The answer contained in their own records is a quiet and definitive no. Our investigation begins with the most direct evidence we have: the photographs. When we look at images of the great cities of the 19th century, of London, Paris, New York, Chicago, Melbourne, we see a world of impossible scale. We see miles of paved streets, lined with ornate, multi-story buildings made of granite and limestone. We see intricate stonework, towering spires, and domes that rival those of ancient Rome. These are not temporary wooden structures. They are monuments of permanence, built to last for centuries. Yet something is profoundly wrong with these images. The streets are often empty. A grand boulevard, wide enough for 8 lanes of modern traffic, might feature a single horse-drawn cart. A colossal train station, with a vaulted iron and glass roof that could shelter thousands, sits vacant, with only a handful of distant figures on the platform. The scale of the architecture is overwhelming, but the human presence is underwhelming. Where are the people? Where are the bustling crowds that we are told defined the industrial age? It is a persistent, unnerving silence. The official explanation is that early photography required long exposure times, blurring out any moving people. This is a partial truth, but it fails to explain the consistency of the phenomenon. It doesn't explain the pristine condition of the streets, free of the debris that a massive construction project would inevitably create. It does not explain the sheer absence of scaffolding, cranes, or any visible signs of active construction on buildings that are supposedly brand new. The world depicted in these photographs does not feel like it is being built. It feels like it has just been discovered. The few people we do see often look out of place. They stand in small groups, dwarfed by the structures around them, their simple clothing a stark contrast to the sophisticated design of their environment. They look less like the builders of this world, and more like the first colonists of a new one. This visual dissonance is the first clue. The environment does not match the inhabitants. The infrastructure is for a population of millions, but the photographs show a population of thousands. It forces us to ask, was the world truly this empty? Or were the cities built for a population that was not yet there? The story says these are boomtowns, bursting at the seams with activity. But the camera, the silent witness of the era, captures a different reality. It captures a world of profound and unsettling emptiness. The visual anomaly leads to a practical one. Let us move beyond the photographs and consider the physical logistics. Let us consider what it would actually take to build this world with the tools and population documented at the time. Consider a single, average-sized stone government building from the 1870s. We see thousands of them, in cities large and small. The stone had to be quarried, often hundreds of miles away. This required a massive labor force at the quarry itself, men to drill, blast, and cut enormous blocks from the earth. These blocks, weighing many tons, then had to be transported. The railways were supposedly being built at the same time, so in many cases, transport would have relied on horse-drawn wagons over primitive roads. Imagine the number of wagons, horses, and men required just to move the raw materials for one building. Once at the site, each stone was shaped and finished with intricate detail by hand. Chisels, hammers, and saws. Then, these multi-ton blocks had to be lifted, sometimes hundreds of feet into the air. Without modern cranes, this was done with complex systems of pulleys, derricks, and scaffolding, all powered by horses or, at best, a rudimentary steam engine. The sheer manpower required for a single project is staggering. Now, multiply that by the thousands of such buildings constructed simultaneously across the continent. Where did these armies of specialized laborers come from? Where were the stonemasons, the engineers, the quarrymen? Now, consider the railway network. Between 1850 and 1890 in the United States alone, over 150,000 miles of track were laid. Let us break that down. 1 mile of track required grading the land, clearing forests, blasting through rock, building bridges and tunnels. It required felling trees for tens of thousands of railroad ties, forging thousands of steel rails, and hammering in hundreds of thousands of spikes. Historians estimate that it took the labor of around 400 men for 1 year to build just 10 miles of track in average terrain. Using this conservative estimate, the 150,000 miles of track would require a workforce of 6 million men working continuously for 10 years. Or 600,000 men working for a century. Yet the entire population of the United States in 1850 was only 23 million, and a tiny fraction of those were able-bodied men available for such grueling itinerant labor. Most were farmers, tied to their land. The numbers simply do not compute. This isn't even accounting for the canals, the sewer systems, the dams, the thousands of miles of paved streets, the factories, or the millions of residential buildings. We are looking at a coordinated, continent-spanning construction effort that would tax the resources of a modern, 21st-century superpower. To believe the official story, we must believe that a small, agrarian society with limited technology and a scattered population achieved all of this in a few decades. The logistics defy reason. The physical task was too large, the timeline too short, and the available workforce too small. It is a practical impossibility. When confronted with these logistical impossibilities, the official historical narrative becomes vague and evasive. The explanations offered are generic, almost templated. We are told of the spirit of the age, of unprecedented innovation, and most frequently, of mass immigration. These are not explanations, they are narrative placeholders. They are designed to fill a logical gap without providing concrete, verifiable data. Let's examine the immigration claim. While it is true that many people immigrated to North America in the 19th century, the numbers do not solve the problem. Official records show that the majority of these immigrants were families, seeking to farm. They were not armies of skilled stonemasons and engineers arriving with their tools, ready to build cathedrals. Furthermore, the timeline is often inverted. The grandest infrastructure of many cities, the city halls, the libraries, the sewer systems, the original street grids, was often completed before the largest waves of immigration are recorded. The infrastructure appears first, the people second. This is the reverse of organic growth. A growing population creates a need for infrastructure. The records show infrastructure appearing in anticipation of a population that does not yet exist. Then there is the issue of missing records. In city after city, when one attempts to find the architectural plans, the financial ledgers, or the detailed labor rolls for these monumental 19th-century constructions, they are conveniently missing. The most common explanation given is fire. The Great Fires of Chicago, of Boston, of San Francisco, are presented as tragedies that destroyed the civic records. While these fires certainly happened, their use as a blanket explanation for the absence of foundational documents becomes a suspicious pattern. It is too convenient. The very documents that would prove who built these cities, who paid for them, and how it was done, are the ones that are selectively absent. We are left with newspaper articles that announce the grand opening of a building, but not the multi-year process of its construction. We have photographs of the finished product, but not of the work in progress. The story has a beginning and an end, but the middle, the part that explains the work, is a void. The official story fails because it cannot withstand scrutiny. It relies on broad generalizations, it inverts the logical sequence of cause and effect, and it leans on the convenient destruction of the very evidence needed to verify its claims. It is a story that asks for faith, not for critical examination. The anomalies we have identified are not confined to a single country or continent. They represent a global pattern. If we zoom out from North America and look at the world in the 19th century, We see the same story repeating itself with stunning uniformity. From Melbourne and Sydney in Australia, to Cape Town in South Africa, to Buenos Aires in Argentina, to the colonial centers of Asia, the same phenomenon occurs. Small, sparsely populated colonies or towns suddenly, and with little explanation, blossom into magnificent cities of stone and iron within the same narrow window of time, roughly from 1850 to 1890. The architectural style is also suspiciously uniform. Whether it is called Beaux-Arts, Second Empire, or Neoclassical, the fundamental design language is the same. We see the same grand columns, the same arched windows, the same ornate domes and mansard roofs on government buildings, banks, and post offices in vastly different parts of the world. These were regions with unique local cultures, different climates, and vastly different levels of technological development. How did they all, independently and simultaneously, decide to build in the same complex architectural style? A style that originated in Europe, and required a level of masonry skill and engineering knowledge that was simply not present in these fledgling colonial outposts. The official narrative suggests that these styles were exported from Europe. But this doesn't explain the speed and scale. It doesn't explain how a city like Melbourne, Australia, with a documented population of just over 20,000 in 1850, could transform itself into a metropolis rivaling the capitals of Europe in only 30 years. It had no local tradition of classical stonework. It had a tiny labor pool. It was geographically isolated from the rest of the world. Yet it produced buildings that are, brick for brick, the equal of anything in Paris or Vienna. This is not a coincidence. It is a template. The same grid-like city plans appear. The same oversized, monumental public buildings appear. The same narrative of sudden, explosive growth from nothing is told. It is as if a pre-designed software package for a city was being installed in multiple locations across the globe. The pattern is too consistent to be the result of organic, independent development. It suggests a coordinated effort on a global scale. It suggests that the history of the 19th century is not the story of many different nations industrializing, but perhaps the story of one, single event, the evidence of which is imprinted on the face of our cities. The same impossible construction, at the same time, in the same style, all across the world. Let us set aside the photographs and the global patterns, and focus on the cold, hard logic of the numbers. This is where the official story completely collapses. We will take one specific, well-documented example: the state of Ohio in the mid-19th century. In the year 1850, the official United States Census recorded the population of Ohio as just under 2 million people. Now, let's analyze this number. Approximately half, or 1 million, were female. Of the remaining 1 million males, about half were either too young or too old for heavy labor. This leaves us with a maximum potential workforce of 500,000 able-bodied men. But this is not the true number of available laborers. The vast majority of Ohio's population at this time, upwards of 80%, were farmers and their families. Their labor was tied to the land. They were not free to leave their farms for years at a time to build railways or cities. So, let's be generous and say that 20% of this male workforce, or 100,000 men, were not engaged in agriculture. From this number, we must still subtract merchants, doctors, lawyers, politicians, clergy, and all the other professions that keep a society running. A realistic pool of men available for large-scale, manual construction projects would be, at the absolute most, perhaps 50,000. Now, let's look at what was built. Between 1850 and 1860, the state of Ohio laid nearly 3,000 miles of railway track. Using our previous conservative estimate of 400 men per year to build 10 miles of track, constructing 3,000 miles in a decade would require a standing army of 120,000 laborers working full-time every day. Our most generous estimate of the available labor pool was 50,000. The math is simple. The state had less than half the manpower required to build its railways alone. And this calculation does not even touch the construction of the cities. It does not account for the quarrying of stone for the Ohio State House in Columbus, a massive undertaking in itself. It does not account for the canals that were dug, the roads that were paved, or the thousands of factories, churches, and homes that were supposedly built in the same period. The numbers are not just off by a small margin. They are off by an order of magnitude. It is a mathematical impossibility. This is not an isolated case. You can run the same analysis for Illinois, for Pennsylvania, for Missouri. You can do it for provinces in Canada or states in Australia. The result is always the same. The documented population is a fraction of what would be required to produce the documented infrastructure in the documented timeframe. The story we are told is a deficit. The labor is a phantom. The numbers in the official records do not add up. And when the numbers do not add up, the entire premise of the history we have been taught is fundamentally broken. When a theory is contradicted by evidence, it must be discarded. The theory that 19th century populations built the world we see in their photographs is contradicted by the visual, logistical, and numerical evidence. So, we must consider an alternative hypothesis. This is not a turn towards fantasy, but towards a more logical explanation that fits all the available data. What if the narrative is inverted? What if the 19th century populations did not build these massive cities and this intricate infrastructure? What if they found it? Consider this hypothesis. The world we see in those early photographs is the remnant of a more advanced, more populous, and globally integrated prior civilization. A civilization that disappeared or collapsed sometime before the start of our recorded 19th century history, leaving behind its vast infrastructure. The people we see in the 19th century are not the builders. They are the inheritors. They are pioneers, yes, but not in the sense of building from scratch. They are pioneers in the sense of exploring, claiming, and repurposing a world that was already built. This hypothesis elegantly solves all the anomalies we have observed. It explains the visual discrepancy. The cities are empty because they were built for a much larger population that is no longer there. The new inhabitants are just beginning to move in. It solves the practical impossibility. The monumental construction was not achieved with simple tools and a small labor force because it was already complete. The work of the 19th century was one of maintenance, repair, and minor additions, not primary creation. It explains the failure of the official story. The records are missing because they never existed. The narrative of construction was created after the fact, to explain a world that the new inhabitants did not understand. The fires were a convenient way to erase the lack of evidence. It explains the global pattern. The architecture is the same all over the world because it was part of a single, unified global system. This is not to suggest magic or aliens. Human civilizations rise and fall. It is possible that a cycle of history has been hidden from us or forgotten. We call the Dark Ages a period of lost knowledge. What if the 19th century was not the dawn of a new age, but the recovery from a more recent and unrecorded Dark Age? A period of resettlement where humanity moved back into the empty shell of a world that was left behind. This hypothesis is unsettling. It challenges the very foundation of our modern identity. But it is based on the evidence presented in the official records themselves. The empty cities, the impossible logistics, the failed math, they all point to one conclusion. The story we have been told is not the only one, and it may not be the true one. We have examined the photographs. We have analyzed the logistics. We have run the numbers. At every stage of the investigation, the official history of the 19th century presents us with profound contradictions. The visual evidence shows grand, empty cities. The practical logistics show that the scale of construction was impossible for the documented technology and labor force. The official statistics, the very numbers provided by the governments of the era, show a population that was mathematically incapable of achieving what is attributed to it. And the same impossible story is repeated, in the same way, all across the globe. We are left with a choice. We can accept the story we have been told, and in doing so, we must accept a world where the laws of mathematics, economics, and physics do not apply. A world where a handful of farmers can build empires of stone overnight. Or, we can trust the numbers. We can trust our own reason. And we can begin to ask more difficult questions. This investigation does not claim to have the final answer. Its purpose is to demonstrate that there is a fundamental problem with the record. The data is broken. The story does not fit the facts. The truth of what happened in the 19th century is not a settled matter. It is an open question. We encourage you not to take our word for it. The records we have discussed are not secret. The census data, the city directories, the historical maps, they are available in libraries, in archives, and online. Look up the history of your own town or city. Find the date when its oldest, most impressive buildings were constructed. Then, find the official population records for that same year. Do the math for yourself. See if the numbers add up. The evidence is not hidden in a vault. It is hiding in plain sight. All that is required is for you to look. If you believe these questions are worth asking, and wish to continue this investigation into the anomalies of our shared past, follow our work for what is yet to be uncovered.